S21 Ultra is much cheaper than last year's S20 Ultra, but that doesn't mean that it's worse in any way. Hey there guys, my name is Victor from PhoneArena, and here are all the differences you should know about the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra and what makes it way better than the Samsung S20 Ultra from last year.
By the way, you will hear more about some of the toughest cases for the S21 Ultra by our sponsor Encased towards the end of this video.
Starting off with the S20 Ultra. This was the first device of its kind from Samsung, featuring a massive camera bump and design sitting at 6.9 inches. It feels hefty and massive in the hand. It pretty much screams premium at this point with aluminium sides and a glossy glass back and front. Quite the fingerprint magnet actually, but story for another time. But at the same time, we have the new S21 Ultra with relatively the same size and a redesigned look. Where the S20 Ultra had a massive camera bump, the S21 series replaced it with a more tapered and natural flowing design. Not only that, but the whole back is now matte. I mean, listen to that. So then, moving on to the display. Boy was the S20 Ultra a much needed refresh. The S20 lineup was the first from Samsung to feature a 120Hz display refresh rate, and it's one of the best things they could have done for their phones at the time. This made the phone overall much smoother and faster, but here's the drawback. You could not use the option on the device's full 1440p resolution. You had to drop to 1080p to use it. Thankfully, this was fixed on the S21 Ultra, so you can now squeeze all of those 120Hz at 1440p. The newer Ultra can also detect when you're not scrolling and don't need that full 120Hz, and it will then drop the refresh to as low as 10Hz automatically to preserve battery life. Besides that, the camera system on both is now slightly different. The S21 Ultra packs 2 telephoto lenses, while the S20 Ultra has only one. But the main and ultra-wide cameras are practically identical. And good news is that the infamous focusing issues on the S20 Ultra have been fixed on the new model, which, by the way, ditched the depth sensor for a laser autofocus module. If you're not convinced that there is a difference though, let's have a look with a simple video test, shall we? I found stabilization to be quite decent and colors seemed fine, and autofocusing was good on both, but we should note that the S21 Ultra came out a bit more saturated while also handling exposure slightly better. Nevertheless, I moved on and did some wide-angle shots, and both seemed to do quite okay, with the S21 Ultra being slightly wider and with the ability to selectively focus. Then, moving onwards to the telephoto, this is where we noticed mixed results. The S20 Ultra actually comes out on top if you shoot at 5 times zoom, but for most anything else, and especially above 10 times zoom, the S21 Ultra stands out with cleaner photos with more detail. So in summary, at 3 times and 10 times, the S21 Ultra was much more sharp and clear, while the S20 Ultra came out better at 5 times zoom. So then, moving on from there, I tried some portrait mode shots, and I have to admit that both did an awesome job. I mean, Samsung's really on top of their game with this mode, to be honest, and I didn't find any notable differences in color or a problem with the depth of field simulation. I then moved indoors to check both in a bit of a low light condition, and they were pretty much on par. I mean, our mechanical chameleon did come out rather sharp given the lower light, but moving on from there, a quick macro shot showed that the S21 Ultra did a much better job at capturing close-up subjects, since it was more true to life, whereas the S20 Ultra came out a bit more mushy and soft with wrong colors. So finally, we decided to check out the selfie cameras. Both were actually quite good, but the S21 Ultra had a bit better dynamic range with, albeit an annoying lens flare, but I'll put it down to preference. So my conclusion here is that both cameras are amazing, and I would not recommend one phone over the other solely based on camera quality, unless you really care about 10 times zoom and further. But for all else, the differences are not huge. Performance-wise, the S20 Ultra is a beast if you get it in the US with the Snapdragon 865 chip, but it had notable issues with the international models, rocking the Exynos 990 processor. I mean, sure, the 990 is still a flagship level SoC, but it had a big gap from the Snapdragon version. It felt like a different device altogether. Thankfully, the S21 Ultra manages to fix many of those wrongs. The US model comes with the newer Snapdragon 888, which is a further jump, but international models also get a big improvement with the Exynos 2100. By the way, in our testing, the Exynos is still a few percentage points slower, but the gap has narrowed, and in terms of battery life, you no longer get huge discrepancies. So in the spirit of that, I was hoping that the battery would be a good improvement too, but I ended up with mixed results, so take that with a grain of salt. I guess there are limits to how much you can improve over 1 year after all. Or so I thought. I mean, the fingerprint was also improved. I noticed that it's much more reliable now and easier to find with your finger since it's larger. I mean, just have a look. And just in case you're not convinced so far as to which phone is worth more per gram, the price is the real hook, line and sinker here, guys. The S20 Ultra starts at around $13.99 US, whereas the S21 Ultra is now $200 cheaper, starting at $11.99. I mean, sure, you would miss the SD card slot and lack of charger in the box, but this is still a good deal, even more so when we mentioned the fact that the S21 Ultra has support for the S Pen. I mean, that's darn impressive. So I guess what I was trying to get to was the following. These two devices are amazing. Had Samsung not lowered the price of the S21 Ultra, it would have been hard to recommend it. But this new price is a perfect example of running a good business after all. And if you're still against these two devices to your core, then I really have to say you're not the target audience for them. The Ultra is for those who want the absolute best no matter the cost, and Samsung did that with their latest iteration, while also paying attention to the price. I mean, it's impressive altogether.
Now, if you enjoy using these phones and want to keep them in pristine condition, you should be using a case and a screen protector. Our sponsor Encased makes some of our favorite cases for phones, including the Ultras. You can select between different designs. For example, the elegant thin armor case protects the phone from all sides and has a cool non-slip finish, which is something useful for the quite slippery S21 Ultra. Or you can step it up to the more resilient Rebel with a unique pattern that absorbs impact yet still has a reasonably slim profile. Or finally, if you want to go a bit next level, you can switch over to the super tough Falcon case that not only protects, but is also built to exceed strict military standards and will give you peace of mind that your device will survive all sorts of rougher environments. I also love that these cases are offered at very reasonable prices, and by the way, you can find a link with some of the great deals for these specific cases down in a link below this video. Installation is also a piece of cake with a drop-in design, and the cases, while protective, still allow for the convenient wireless charging. I also personally love how the buttons on the side retain the original clicky tactile feel, and you do have the full port cutouts for kind of an unrestrained access to your device. So don't forget to protect your expensive flagship phone with a proper case like these here by Encased.
So I must say, this was a blast for me, and as much fun as it was, this actually has to come to an end. So do please subscribe, and I'll most likely see you guys next time.